thank you all for joining me to do this. It's super exciting to get to talk to you all, and it's a real honor for me. And I just wanted to thank you all for your service.
Hey,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
our
Yeah,
pleasure.
absolutely. So I think what would be interesting is for military.com readers, which I assume you all know that that's who this is for. This is a really rare chance to hear from real veterans and former agents who helped keep the NCIS franchise honest on screen, from the flagship series to the many, corners of the universe. So before we get into the fun of talking about like behind the scenes and how you all got started in the job, I was wondering if we could just kind of do like a round robin and just introduce yourself, tell me a bit about your service and what brought you into being a consultant for a show like NCIS.
I
And I don't know
guess
who
I
wants
should,
to kick it off.
I guess I should start because I'm the OG on here.
There you go.
So, my service started as a Marine officer back in 1972. I was assigned to a infantry battalion. By the way, my name's Leon Carroll. And after that, I did 2 years of sea duty. So I learned how both the Marine Corps and the Navy operates. And I was out for about 2 years. I signed up for NIS, applied, didn't get hired the first time, and thought I needed more education and went back to work on my master's. And all of a sudden, I needed a job, so I reapplied and I got hired the first time. And my first assignment was here in the LA area at the Naval Station Long Beach. Then I went from here to our headquarters in DC, and from there, to a float duty. So I did a float both as a civilian and a Marine. And from there back here to Long Beach, and from there to Panama, and from Panama to Norfolk, Virginia, from Norfolk to the Great Northwest, and I kind of ended it all up in Washington, D.C.
Who wants to go next?
I guess I'm second oldest. Uh, Known Leon since 1991 when he sponsored me as an agent, but I'll go back a little further in time. Uh, Enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserve in 1977, had enlisted time, commission time, reserve time, active time. Paperwork's going to catch up one of these days. Uh, Ended up with 30 years in the Marine Corps, 25 years with NIS and NCIS. Um, don't do the math; it'll make your head explode. But the Marine Corps called me back twice during my NCIS time, to be on active duty for activities in Somalia and then a couple of years in Iraq. But there's a little bit of a sad story about how I got involved, and Leon was a part of that. Our mutual friend Bob Bryan was about to retire from NCIS, and he passed away suddenly. And he was to be the tech advisor on NCIS Los Angeles. I retired soon thereafter, but they had an interim tech advisor, and it took a couple of years before I came on board. And it's been a heck of a ride. And I owe it to that. I don't know where he is on your screen, but I'm pointing to Leon over there. I owe it all to him for bringing me in. Do you remember this, Leon? Do you remember this wardrobe? Nature the Beast, playing the range master for you.
That's right. You
And
had a
the
role as a
director,
range
Tony
master.
Warmby, said, "My dear boy, what dialogue is there?" Of course, I couldn't say it, so I had to write it down, and Leon got somebody else to say it. And then my very first episode with NCIS Los Angeles, the director is Tony Warmby. So that was a great full circle in my opinion. So glad to be here, and you guys are carrying the flag into other directions too. So what a franchise!
All right. Well, guess I'll go next. I'm Michael Smith. I'm actually a retired Navy. I never was an NCIS agent, but I was a Master at Arms Command Investigator. So I worked hand in hand with NCIS, and kind of like Al. Well, first I did 21 years in the Navy, retired on active duty. Then I took off my uniform and put on some civilian clothes and became a GS civilian detective for the base police and worked a lot of cases with NCIA and NCIS and my dear friend Dwayne Swear. NCIS New Orleans, Dwayne was the technical advisor. He called me one day and says, "Mike, they're going to start NCIS New Orleans." And he used to like to joke a lot. So I was like, "Man, ain't nobody coming to New Orleans and doing a TV show." Uh, but, but it was real. And he was like, "Just help me with this Navy stuff." And so I would help him from day one, 2014, with the Navy stuff. And a few years in, unfortunately, he passed away. And they came to me and said, "Hey, will you take his place?" I said, "Well, first of all, I need to talk to his wife and make sure it's okay with her." And she was like, "You better take his place before some butthole gets it." So I've been here for 11 years. And again, I got vetted by Leon. You know, he's the GOAT. You got to kiss the ring. So, so Leon vetted me, and he's been my mentor ever since. And I have a joke wherever I go, especially here, coming in behind Leon was tough, but I had to tell Costumes one day, I said, "You know what, Leon is the Michael Jordan of all that, but that makes me LeBron James." But after my retirement as a civilian working for the Navy, then I fell into the show industry franchise, and you know, so everybody's treating me like family. You know, New Orleans, and I did Hawaii, and now I'm here in Los Angeles, and I just love it.
It's amazing.
Hey, how's everybody doing? RJ Cline. I'm the newbie or the probie of the show, I guess, to stay in line. I'm here with Origins. Background on me, 32 years in law enforcement. I am retired, obviously, to be here now, but I started my career back in 1991, active duty in the Navy. I did originally 4 years active duty, got out off active duty, stayed in the reserves for a year. During my active duty time, I happened to be stationed at Naval Station Mayport in Jacksonville, Florida, and I got fapped around a couple times, TADs from the command, and part of that was to the base security. And then I got augmented to the NCIS office at Mayport at the time, which was during the transition from NIS to NCIS. So I worked there under the base security and did some stuff with NCIS, and that was my first introduction. Like I said, I ended up getting off of active duty, went back to my hometown, small town in Kentucky, stayed in the reserves. Decided that I wanted to return to active duty, but I actually did an inter-service transfer. So I went reserve Navy one day, active duty Marine Corps the next day. Had to go to boot camp all over again, accepted an administrative reduction in rank in order to go into the Marine Corps. So I went from being a petty officer third class in the Navy or an E4 back to a contract E2 or a PFC for the Marine Corps. So I went to boot camp again. Kind of had a fast one pulled on me that I didn't realize by the Marine Corps recruiter at that time. Since the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy, and most occupational fields are kind of similar. I was in the aviation community originally in the Navy. So the recruiter said, they're not going to send you back to Pensacola to send you through school again. They're going to just keep you doing the same job in the Navy when you're in the Marine Corps. Well, that wasn't the case. I found out that I got inducted in under an open contract. So it was at the needs of the Marine Corps at the time. Luckily for me, I ended up getting into the law enforcement field. So my first MOS in the Marine Corps was I was a career MP. When I got into the MP field, I figured out real quick the pinnacle of that was to get into the investigative fields. At the time, that being CID, the Criminal Investigation Division. During that time, they were only taking MPs to lat move in the CID. They weren't taking any other job fields or MOSs within the Marine Corps. But you had to be a sergeant. And when I started looking at it, I was a PFC and then a Lance Corporal, so only a E2 and an E3. So I kind of had to buy my time. I went to the office, talked to the agents, found out what I could do to strengthen my package. They said, if you can take this course, that course, if you can continue your education. So I did that all the way up until I was a corporal. And then the chief warrant officer, who's the OIC of the CID office, which the equivalent for that would be the SAC on the NCIS side of the office, kind of took me under his wing. In between my corporal grade and my sergeant grade, they put me in the OJT program. So when I did become a sergeant, they pipelined me straight in. I was fortunate to go to a lot of schools, the Military Police Investigator School, the CID Apprentice Special Agent course, and I also went to FLETC and graduated from there, and then an SABT course once I became a Marine Special Agent with NCIS. I was assigned off and on to NIS or actually NCIS at that time for a period of 8 years, and then I rotated back over on the Marine Corps side. I expounded up through the enlisted ranks all the way to the E9, as high as you could go. And that's where I retired as an E9, being the chief investigator, or the equivalent on the civilian side, which would be the SAC. And I retired out of the Camp Pendleton office. So when this production office came looking for somebody, they had a couple set requirements. I and Leon worked with many people we know over the years, but had never worked together. So I'd never personally met Leon. But when they finally reached out to me, which was actually kind of a multiple occasion to offer me the position here, with our mutual point of contact that was sitting at headquarters at the time, I was able to get Leon's number and we talked over the phone. And then, as everybody's already indicated, Leon's the kind of the mentor to everybody. So my first day at Paramount on the lot, he was here to, take me along under his wing and stayed with me through the first episode, and then kind of turned me loose from there.
That's awesome. So, Leon, you are the OG. You brought everyone on board. So, could you walk me through that? Like after you served, did you have any other experience with any kind of entertainment jobs, or was it how did that happen for you?
I was so dumb about entertainment. I thought they filmed an episode in one day. So to tell you how this all happened with me, I had come back after 9/11 as a rehired annuitant. So I had retired, came back to help out, and I was out doing a lot of recruiting of new agents so the guys that were still on the job could go out in the field and do the counterterrorism mission that had been bestowed upon them. So one day I'm working in the office, and Rick Warmack, who had worked for me same time as Al did back in the day, was now the SAC in Los Angeles. Unbeknownst to me, he and another SAC, Mark Ridley, had been sneaking away, going up to what was happening. Nobody in the office knew
Yeah.
that they were actually filming 2 episodes of JAG to introduce NCIS. So those guys and a host of others did such a great job that they wanted to have an agent assigned to the production full time. And of course, the taxpayers are not paying to have NCIS agents working on a TV show. And Rick knew that I was getting kind of tired of all the travel because we handled, myself and my partner, Tony D'Amico, handled pretty much the western part of the state. So we were always on the road going to college campuses, recruiting new agents, analysts, and administrative personnel. So he came to me and he says, "Hey, you know, they're going to start this TV show and they're looking for somebody to help them out. Would you be willing to do it a couple of days a week?" And I said, "Well, I could probably do that a couple of days a week. Where do they film?" And he said, "Santa Clara." And I could tell when I asked that question, he knew I was probably going to say no because Santa Clarita is 60 miles from my house. But at that time, the Los Angeles field office was 60 miles from my house. And I was only going there to do some of the interviews, pre-screenings, and that type of thing. So I said, okay, if it's only a few days a week, I'll try it. My first day was 21 hours. Well, actually, I worked 19 of the 21-hour day. And I thought to myself, what the hell did I get myself into? And as RJ will tell you, every week I ask him, "Are you sure you hanging in here on this with these long hours?" Now, none of these guys are doing 21 hours. I don't think. Maybe Al did a 21-hour day, but I was like, as agents, we work, long hours sometimes. And in fact, I think the longest I ever worked on a surveillance was 72 straight hours. But it wasn't all the time. So I wasn't used to that, and the drive was not the easiest drive to make through the city of LA. So anyway, I started first day, Mark Harmon, they had my chair next to his, and he is the master of really figuring out people like from meeting them the first time. So he's asking me a lot of things that have done interrogations have done just to kind of establish rapport. Now before that, I had met him at the NCIS office in Los Angeles because they played a prank on on an inspection crew by having him come in and briefing what was supposed to have been a homicide that happened at Seal Beach. And he came in wearing a pea coat and a cap and all of that. And people in the inspection team didn't even recognize him. And I'm starting to laugh. And then finally somebody's like, now, mind you, the two episodes had already aired, of JAG that introduced these characters. So as he was leaving, I said hi and gave him something that we would hand out to people that were trying to recruit. And from then on, we just had a great relationship to this day. And I think starting with that and then going on 7 years later when LA came about, they had recruited another, sorry, RJ, it was a master gunnery sergeant. They recruited a master gunnery sergeant, no investigative experience,
Right.
to be the technical advisor on NCIS LA. Well, that didn't last too long, and so as Al has already said, Bob Bryan, who had been the person that did the firearms instruction and all that, was next in line. He passed away suddenly. And so I said, Al, do you want to do it? And Al jumped in and did it. And same thing with New Orleans a few years later. Gary Glassberg, who is the showrunner for that, came to me and says, hey, do you know anybody in New Orleans? And right off the bat, Wayne Swear jumped in my head. And I said, yeah, what do you need? He goes, I just need to talk to somebody about it. He didn't even tell me what it was about. Later on, Harmon told me. And he called Dwayne and they talked and they just hit it off because they both like to cook. And obviously both of them like to eat too, based on the size that they were. But anyway, so those two guys, became a bond for a long, long time. And I had known Dwayne for years, even before that. And so I was sad when he passed away. But when he passed away, Mike stepped up. I knew Mike was working for him as a backup, and he can't always be there all the time. So I'm sure Mike did that, and we did that. I did that with Bob and other people here in LA, including Al, as a matter of fact. So that happened, and so Mike will tell you his story, but then fast forward to RJ. They did the same mistake on Origins. They hired, well, after Alice didn't do it, they hired a Marine Sergeant Major who knew nothing about law enforcement, but he knew Camp Pendleton. And he did the first two episodes, I believe. And it came up, well, this is not going to work. And I didn't want to work, be on set. I'm working with the writers now. So, boom, they came up with this search, and RJ came up, RJ's name came up, and I got a hold of Ivan Acosta, who is the person we both know. Ivan wants your job, by the way, RJ. Watch out. He just retired.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, he says, yeah, yeah. So I said, hey, let's give RJ a shot. And RJ is still with him after one season and what, 8 or 9 episodes. And that's kind of the history of how this whole thing fell out in terms of technical advisors.
That's really amazing. Something I think is just hard to wrap my head around, honestly, is how NCIS as a franchise started as a JAG spinoff, and now the mothership series is like one of the longest running shows of all time. And then you have all these other super successful spinoffs. I mean, it's incredible. What does that feel like to you being there from the beginning, Leon?
Well, I would say this. At first, it was a little bit of angst about the Los Angeles show because I think the feeling was, hey, there's nobody that can be better than the original. And at that time, we had just started to do really well. We didn't start off that great, to be honest. Our ratings were, I think, in the 20s or something. But we were the little engine that could. And every year we got better and better and better. And all of a sudden, we're beating American Idol. And I'm like, whoa, that snuck up on me. But I think from looking at each each spinoff, as you say, it was different. Like LA was based on our Office of Special Projects initially, which I was one of the first agents assigned to that back in the early '80s. To it became something different by the time Al got there, but that was something that was pretty realistic. New Orleans, as Mike has said, what the hell are they doing down there? I think that was more of a business decision. But we had an NCIS office in New Orleans. And it's kind of interesting because people don't realize that NCIS is a worldwide organization, 120 some odd offices worldwide. And I got a note from a former Navy captain friend of mine. What the hell is NCIS doing in Australia? And I had to laugh. And I go, hey, we've had an office there, forever. And this guy was a captain of a ship. And I said, and then I started sending him the information on the office, but we've had somebody in Australia for a long time. Now it's a large presence, and Al is actually the consultant to that show right now.
That's incredible. So I guess anyone can answer this one. For people who don't know, who, my readers or anyone who watches this, what does a consultant do? What is like the day-to-day work that you all do on these shows?
I'll let one of them answer. I don't do it
I
every day
take a
anymore.
stab at it.
Okay,
That can differentiate LA versus Sydney.
there you go.
With LA, a lot like Leon was talking about, a lot of driving, uh, getting a script, concept draft script, reading, putting notes into the writer, director, showrunner, that type of thing. Meetings, both in person and virtual during COVID, and then filming. And as RJ knows right now, you're there from call to wrap, especially in a new series. I got lucky as LA got more mature that if they were doing stuff in the ops center, I probably didn't have to be there that day because they'd done it so many times and there was no bad guys, no gunplay or things like that. But it's pretty much seeing everything way more than a camera lens and trying to anticipate, which I think falls right into our respective military careers and law enforcement careers, that's real. So we're trying to work with people we like to have them look even better and then to represent both military personnel, veterans, and law enforcement professionals in a credible way with some show latitude, as I was reminded several times by very, very smart people up the food chain, that it is a television show and it's 42 minutes. Differentiate that with NCIS Sydney, where they're 16 or 17 hours ahead of me, depending on what time of year. So they're on their weekend and I'll be getting stuff on Sunday for their month, that kind of thing, where I'm not in person. So, and there's different culture. They spell words differently, those kinds of things that, and their humor is very different, but they are the nicest people I've never met, easy to get along with. And I have to tune into the show because I didn't see it being filmed. So I'm as surprised or pleased as anybody else in the viewing audience, several million, as we all know, for all the franchise. I wish I could be doing more, but I think they, as the newest, second newest, sorry, RJ, as the second newest in the franchise, they have watched the other shows and they've helped form where they're going with it and then putting their flavor on it.
That's great. Michael
And
or
if I can just,
RJ, do I? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, if I can do a shout out, good day, mates. That's all the Australian language I know.
My take on the daily, when I first got here, and Dwayne had kind of told me, he says, "Hey, Mike, when you stand in for me, sit in the seat and wait for them to ask you a question." And I said, "Well, I don't think this is going to work out because if I see something wrong, I'm going to say something. So I don't think I'm going to be here long." And when I first took over, I asked the first AD, I said, "Look, I need the SOP on how to be a technical advisor." And she laughed at me and says, "We'll figure it out." So did the producing director. Everybody was like, "Oh, we'll figure it out, Mike." And so the first scene, they were filming on a ship. And I'm down watching my monitor on the ground level, and they're doing everything wrong. So I run up 2 flights of steps. I interfere with their blocking. I tell everybody what they're doing wrong. I tell them how to do it right, and I run back downstairs to my monitor. Nobody said a word to me all day. At the end of the day, the first AD pulls me to the side and says, "Mike, you can't do that." And I was like, "Well, I asked for an SOP. Y'all said we'll figure it out, and that's me figuring it out." So, so, so as I went along for weeks and for a couple of months, I was still open my mouth whenever I seen something wrong. And a couple of union guys finally came to me and says, "Mike, are you going to change?" I said, "No, I might not be here next season, but I'm not changing." They said, "Well, we're going to adjust to you because everything you recommended is right." So the producing director, everybody said, "But let us teach you on when to talk." So they taught me on when to speak, and they let me speak, and it's been like that ever since. And Leon knows what I'm talking about, and all the other advisors, they know it. When to talk is a critical thing. Like, I want to jump in there, they're doing it wrong, but you got to wait and let them finish, and then respectfully don't say the word wrong, but say, you might like that, but you might like this a little better. There's some, you got to be respectful when you open your mouth.
Well, Mike, I have to tell this story. We had an episode where Bob Newhart was playing the coroner before Ducky. And one evening he had his whole family come, his grandkids. And one of the grandkids was like 4 or 5 years old and was talking through the takes, right? And so somebody came over and said to him, "Hey, you can't talk during the takes." And he goes, "Why not? He's talking about the actors." So yeah, I get that. That I have to tell you, the first day I had similar situation. I'm not one to run out there and like try to tell people what to do, but while we're filming, but first shot, first day in Yankee White, we had Secret Services on Air Force One, et cetera, et cetera. And the actor had a goatee. And back then, facial hair was not a thing that federal law enforcement had a lot of. And so Don Belisario, who is the creator of all of this stuff, he's directing and he looks at our small black and white monitors that are like 6 inches wide. I don't even know how he saw this. He goes, "What's that on his face?" And somebody says, "Oh, he's got a goatee." He goes, he turns to me and he goes, "Secret Service doesn't wear go-tos, do they?" And I said, "No, sir, they don't." And he goes, "Tell him either that goes or he goes." And he said, "Well, we knew he had the goatee and he's in another production where he needs a hair." He goes, "I don't give a S. It's got to go." And so it held up the first shot for about an hour for him to go shave. So after that, we start doing the scene, and he's got his arm around the president, right? The guy who played George Bush. And I went in the cut and I said, "Hey, you can't, you're here to protect him, not be his buddy. You're not supposed to have your arm around the president during a shot." He turns to me and he goes, "Who are you? The director?" And I said, "No." Obviously, he knew I wasn't. I'm the TA. But that taught me one thing, and this is why, and I know RJ and I both are probably missing a table read. I go to those because I introduce myself to these actors. So when I go up and give them, corrective advice, they know who I am. Now, when I started, and I don't know, if it's still the same, but there were a lot of people that had my back. But when you have the top guy saying, "Hey, what he says goes," and this is what Belisario did really early on. He established this. As long as whatever Leon says, we're going to do it unless it changes entertainment value. And so from then on, I had no problem on the mothership, giving people advice and that type of thing. So that's something that, we all learned the hard way, and I did as well as Mike.
Yeah,
Our Oh, sorry,
I,
go ahead.
I can allude to the same thing. So, like I said, something I got that a lot of other people didn't get. At least I had Leon here for the first episode to kind of explain to me like when I should interact, how I shouldn't, or whatever. And then I really used the first episode to kind of get my feet under me. The first episode, I didn't get a lot of emails. There was a lot of meetings that I was not in that I didn't even know happened. It made problems in scripts or in the scene because I would see something last minute and then it's too late to change it because I wasn't in the preparatory meeting. So when I came back this year, I got real boisterous and I was like, I need to do this. I need to be in this. I need to be on this email chain. And it totally changed the trajectory for this year to where, as Leon just alluded to, now every time something comes up or they're questioned, they're like, let's call RJ, let's text RJ, let's phone call RJ. So I am really, really inundated this year in all the aspects. As I probably should have been more the first episode or the first season, but I was just getting my feet under me. So a lot more interaction for me definitely this year. And we've been able to correct stuff, especially as Leon alluded to with scripts and acronyms and uniforms, making sure we're doing service to not only the agency being NCIS, but the branches of the military for the actors and the characters that they're portraying as well.
It's
That's great.
interesting about the interesting story about the facial hair. Um, you guys probably have the same experience. You get to work with people you watched on television, and you get to see them as a different kind of person, not just a character. And Gerald McCraney came in to play an admiral. Scott Gemmell was the showrunner for Los Angeles and said, "Hey, get Mac, get ready to be squared away. He's going to come back and he's going to see Hetty and all that kind of good stuff." Mac had a goatee, and I said, "What Navy is he supposed to be with? He's not with our Navy if he's got a goatee and a mustache." And he goes, "How are you going to fix it?" I said, "He's retired. He's coming back under contract with the federal government, blah, blah, blah." Well, then if he's not in uniform, how are the Marines on this helicopter going to know to pop to attention? Well, Linda Hunt, who's very, very tiny, leans forward. You don't even see her in the helicopter. She goes, "Hello, Admiral." What do Marines do when they hear somebody senior that? Boom! They all jump to attention. Linda just disappears, and General McCraney booms, "At ease," and the show continued. So we fixed phase one. Phase two was they needed an official file photo of him in uniform and had to put ribbons together and a bunch of other things. So I said to post-production, I said, "Can you digitize that out?" And they said, "No, stand on his mark." So if you see a full-length official file photo of Admiral Gerald McCraney, it's my lower jaw. I said, "Hey, I can do that for one of my childhood heroes, not a problem." So you've seen me on camera. You just didn't realize it.
That is
But you just make it
awesome.
work. Their failure is not an option.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do I'm curious, what in the franchise is the most like reality, and what aspects of reality does the show have to sort of compress or change to fit like the drama that you want to create in a television show?
Well, I think starting with the procedurals, like, I think when they do the storylines, a lot of times writers don't think about, they don't think about uniforms. They don't think about how you're going into a building and that type of thing. So I think the reality part of that we've always stuck true to. And I do watch the other guys work, and and I look at, when they're doing raids and they're doing, we kind of fake the handcuffing thing, but just the procedural stuff, it has to be right. The crime scene stuff, that has to be right. Even though the stories are very wonky at sometimes, when we first started on the mothership, we actually used some real life stories. And one of the things that I'll mention, we took writers to NIS offices, NCIS offices, and we basically let them hear stories from real agents. We took them to military bases, Camp Pendleton being probably the one that we went to most, but we filmed on military bases, Port Hueneme, Point Mugu, that type of thing. So they got a flavor of being around the military. They got a flavor of law enforcement. And so I think they really received an appreciation for what both did, what we do. So I think that's really the key thing, is to get them to respect what law enforcement and what what the military actually does for the country.
Does anyone else have another take on that? Or I mean, Leon said it pretty great, but I don't know if anyone else has an opinion.
No, and just echo what Leon said is if you try to make it too exacting, first of all, you won't solve a crime and get a conviction in 42 minutes during a 60-minute block. And lab results don't come back, two commercials later. So we understand that part, and that's the drama. But when a showrunner was able to inject as much realism as possible, then made it a lot easier to do the story aspects or the drama you have to inject and the other kinds of things. But I think the biggest thing was respect. Scott Gemmell, the showrunner of NCIS Los Angeles, I mean, unequivocally, we're going to respect all military and law enforcement scenes, even though there's bad cops and bad Marines and sailors. Otherwise, there'd be no NCIS for real. We're still going to do it in a credible way. And I got to give a lot of props to upper management. The same thing with Sydney. They're dealing in a different culture, and they're not making every sailor on Liberty look like, well, we're not going to go there. But even though some do, they're being tasteful about it. And I respect that. And I'll give them some more latitude in other areas and, look away if I have to.
I have a really good example of that. Oh, I don't know what season it was. I did 21 of them, but we were doing a sunset where the American flag was coming down, and this was actually at the Navy Yard, or what portrayed the Navy Yard here. And it was dark, and the flag was not lighted. And I kind of had a division of labor between myself and the military advisor, but that day The military advisor was somebody who was standing in for the actual guy. So I went to the director. I says, hey, you can't show the flag flying and it's dark and it's not lighted. And he goes, why didn't somebody tell me this, before that? So I grabbed the kid that was, standing in for the military advisor. I says, hey, you got to change this and he called the actual guy and he told him, oh yeah, you got to have it lighted. So the director then, of course, we have lighting and it's easy to do, and they did that. So, but those are things that you want to avoid happening at the last minute because it always delays time in production. But there's certain things, and I'll say this, military oriented shows will lose me if they are not authentic in those particular types of things. And I'll have to say, well, I won't say it, but anyway, that will lose any veteran, I think, when you see the military organizations not portrayed the way they really should be.
Uh,
Absolutely.
one of my things is I learned how to cheat. I'm a retired Navy chief, so wherever I'm at, I go hook up with the local chiefs and I join their association. And what I was able to do, especially in New Orleans and Hawaii, especially Hawaii, anytime you seen military on the show, the NCIS Hawaii show, they were real. We were able to work out with public affairs and Navy film office where they can come actually work and they would wear their uniforms. There was a couple of times we needed a corpsman, two corpsmen that were FMF, and we really got two FMF corpsmen from the Marine Corps, and they were Navy corpsmen. So those young ladies were authentic. So a lot of times there's real people. But my forte is on the tactical side. Whenever we're doing room entries or we're doing React, which is the SWAT equivalent for NCIS, or the actors have to do some action, I like to get with stunts because stunts is in control of some of that. And I say, hey, the first 2%, let it be a move that we will really do. But then we started coining the phrase tactical because it's Hollywood. So you take a little creative license. You wanted to look cool. So we would come up with some cool things. Like one time they wanted Scott Bakula to throw a suitcase at a suspect and hit him in the back and knock him down. And I said, well, agents carry a collapsible baton, even though we never seen it on the show before. They never did it. And Scott Bakula wanted everything right. And he said, if Mike says I carry a ass baton and get me one and I'll throw it at the feet and it looked beautiful. He threw the baton at the guy running, tangled up in his feet. So that was tactical, And every time I go somewhere, I'll be like, well, the real is this. And I don't always share the real because I'm conscious of one thing that I learned years ago. Real law enforcement are out there doing a job. So if there's some details of real law enforcement tactics that I can leave out and do tactical stuff, then the bad guys don't see all the real tactics that may interfere with what law enforcement is currently doing.
It kind of made me think, not necessarily on the franchise, obviously, but is there something you see in movies or television that involves like law enforcement or military, you know, operations that you wish that they would just stop depicting or would get it right? Do you have a pet peeve?
Yeah, lasering people, muzzle awareness, none for law enforcement themed things, and then making a young military person, whatever the branch or whatever the nationality, look like a slob.
Yeah.
And that because the natural inclination of an audience is must be a lot more like that rather than they're the outlier. So again, even a
Mm.
bad guy can be portrayed with honor and not having to look like he's a total he or she a dirtbag.
Totally agree with that. We've had some episodes here where reading some scripts, and Leon can attest to that. That I went back and forth behind closed doors with him about the way some things were portrayed or whatever, and I just had to speak up about it. And I said, we just can't do this. We can't have it. It's not good for the Marine Corps and Camp Pendleton, which this show is based largely on, and then it's not good for NCIS either. And luckily, we were able to change most of that. Some creative licensing came into play on some of it, and I had to kind of eat it and deal with it. But we've been able to trace stay true to that, and that's one thing that I'm thankful for.
But for me, this is I love to see shows like that are totally messing up, and I'll tell you why. Because when I'm asked about them, I have one thing to simply say about that show. They don't have a technical advisor. so, so, and I found out, I forget which network it was. There was a network a few years ago tried to start a Marine Corps show, and they called it Red Something, and it failed in the first season. And the reason it failed is because they did not have a Marine Corps advisor, and they did not get a production agreement with the Marine Corps Film Office. And that thing failed miserably in the first season. It was called Red Something, and the people I was talking to about it, I told them you tried to go cheap. It was a big network. Why did you go cheap? Why didn't you get the PA agreement with the Marine Corps Film Office and get you a military Marine Corps advisor, and you would still be around today? But that just shows the power of having technical advisors. So whenever I see those major mistakes, I embrace them and I love them because people need to know they need technical advisors.
That's a great answer. So RJ, you work on Origins, correct?
That's correct.
So you have like a really unique job. Like yours is set in a whole different decade. So how do you approach that and keeping that accurate?
Well, luckily for me, and not to try to toot my own horn, but I was around during this whole time frame. So I was in the Marine Corps with the uniform changes, from the boots to the starching to just our whole transition of what we were in early 90s all the way through. And as I alluded to earlier, I was in and out of the agency during that whole time span too. So I kind of grew and came up and cut my teeth through all those years. So some things I've had to kind of revert every now and then and look back to, but most of it's in memory, and I just have to pull it out. And believe it or not, I'm a guy that kind of keeps a lot of history stuff. So I've got our old orders, a lot of them. I've got the NIST chapters, a lot of that stuff from back then. And Leon's been a big thing for me for anything that I didn't have to go to him with, and just rely on that core knowledge that I had for this show. And it's worked well for me.
That's great. One of the big things in the show is like cross agencies working together, or maybe not working so well together, but working together. And I was just curious, how accurate is that, and what might surprise viewers about how jurisdictions work and stuff like that?
I'll let Al take that one.
Oh. You're talking LA or Sydney, though? Because
No,
Yeah.
no,
Sydney,
not Australia. I
Yeah.
don't know anything about that.
okay, because that we're still figuring that one out. Um, it is difficult because, and as RJ would remember, NIS, we had no jurisdiction per se off base originally. Mother May I and all those kinds of things because we were embedded in the military. Although NCIS proper is mostly civilian, so we got a federal agent status, law enforcement, arrest authority, statutory arrest authority sooner than our sister services, OSI, Army CID, et cetera. But it's still, we're this big in the law enforcement spectrum. And one of the strengths of the real NCIS is we work well with a lot of other agencies. And when you combine with them, you get a lot of bang for your buck. But it's the NCIS series, so NCIS needs to be showing a leading role with solving things. And in LA, it's a broad jurisdiction, like Leon pointed out. In Sydney, we're still figuring that out, and it is one of the areas where I have to say, hey, look, a dead sailor on Liberty in Sydney, out in town, that's an Australian federal police case. We're going to do a reciprocal because we have Navy equities, Navy interests, and we're going to lend support. We'll get Navy records, whatever, to help. But we need to play up our Australian counterparts a little stronger. We can't solve them all by ourselves, especially in 42 minutes. So it's a blend, and we have. I like to poke fun at the FBI. I think that's a cultural thing, but they are a great partner, and I won't do any spoilers, but stay tuned, and we'll see how much NCIS City can work well with others.
So just to touch on that, so in real life, and one thing that I tried to bring to the writers here when they're writing that, and Leon can contest to some of the jurisdictional issues we've had with when scripts are being developed. But in real life, and this was taught to me by my supervisors at the time, when you come into a new area on your rotation or whatever, you're having meetings, if it's coffee or lunch or what have you, with all the local authorities in the area, the figureheads, the chiefs, the SACs, the ASACs, the SSAs, and you're beginning to know each other. You're getting their names in your Rolodex, getting your name out to them so they know to call you if something's involving the service members from your base. So you try to do that liaison right when you come into a new office. Is the way I was taught and the way that I carried out through the entirety of my career. And that benefited not only the agencies, both agencies, the Marine Corps and NCIS and Marine Corps CID, but also everybody that worked for me and my peer group. And then we've tried to show that truly keep to those jurisdictional lines and to show this is really how we tie in or how an agency concedes jurisdiction back to us so we can show that Navy or Marine Corps nexus for us to even be involved with the case in that particular episode.
I like to piggyback off of that. What RJ said in his real life, he would get to an area and hook up with the locals. So I cheat. Whenever I get to a new show, this is my third show, I tell the producers and the writers, hey, when you put out a script, the last time I was in the Navy was in 2006, and things can change. And you got all these other agencies, and the federal government would change a policy on you from year to year. So in order to keep up to date whenever I arrive in a new area, like I just got here in Los Angeles last year, I'm going to reach out to the Navy, the Air Force. I'm going to reach out to everybody I can, talk to folks, visit the film offices, talk to other federal agencies, and go out and eat lunch with them or what have you. So by the time I get a script that says, oh, it's FBI and it's something complex that I don't know, guess what? I have the FBI SSA's phone number, cell phone in my phone, and I tell the writers, look, you don't mind me reaching out, and I will get the real of things so they can kind of creatively tell the right story, just in case something changed that I didn't know about, because things are constantly changing, uniforms, policies, and that has worked well for me. And what I tell the production is, you know how I pay these people back, right? So if I ever come to you and ask for a set visit, and when I really cheat, like last year we did an episode 2009 in Afghanistan. So the writer that did it, he says, Mike, this is going to be a tough one. It's the Marine Corps in Afghanistan in 2009. I said, no, that's easy for me because I got Leon, and I'm going to find some veterans that was there in 2009, and we're going to make them background on the episode, and I'm going to run everything by them. And we did that, and it turned out beautifully. It was perfect, you know, the dialogue. And I'll tell anybody, you might have heard it from me, but I got it from the true veterans that were there. So don't think that I did all this research because I cheated. I called the person and found the person. So
That's great. Yeah, I have similar sort stories to what they're saying. First off, on the mothership, when Al and I were coming along, probably more so than me than Al, there were those professional jealousies, we'll put it that way. And FBI was not known for playing, real well on the playground. So we had the first episode, Yankee White, and Belisario wanted to kind of tease the FBI. Well, what he didn't know was that Robert Mueller, who was the FBI director at that time, and David McCallum, who played Ducky, were like best friends. In fact, they were godparents to each other's kids. And so I asked David after that happened, maybe 2 or 3 episodes later, I says, "Hey, how does Robert Mueller feel about the show?" He hates it. That's how he. And I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yes." He says, he came in and he wanted to change that whole thing that the FBI doesn't work well with others. And here we are stealing bodies from him on Air Force One, right? So that was the big thing when Fornell came on and we tricked him and took the body. That was Yankee White. But I think the show, and believe it or not, even FBI agents really liked the show back in the day because it just gave them some entertainment, and most of them could laugh at themselves because we would always tease them. One of the things that came up in that first season was a line where we were on a train and Gibbs is chasing a guy, and and he says something about NIS, and the guy says, "Well, I told the FBI that." And Gibbs's response was, "Well, we're not the FBI." I thought that was one of the best lines ever, right? So I think in terms of working together, I can tell just by watching, press conferences that it's a lot different now. But NIS and then NCIS, we have to be able to work with these other law enforcement agencies. And that's one of the things that we're really taught to do. When I first became a supervisor in ASAC, my boss, the SAC, would always take me to the office meetings that he was going to with other agencies, local law enforcement, and that back in Norfolk. And then when I became a SAC myself in the Northwest, there was a group called the SAC's meeting group of all the agents. In fact, the Washington State symbol behind me is a plaque that we got when we left, and it has the seal of every agency that worked up there. And once a month, we had a meeting where we would share notes, and it included the U.S. Attorney as well. And it just worked out well. So now you have an avenue where you could just call a boss of another agency, and they know who you are, and they will be willing to help you. And so I think our show, our franchise, has shown that you can work together but still have fun teasing another agency.
So, Mike, you've talked about this a couple times about hiring or putting veterans in the background, and I think that's incredible. And I just wanted to commend you for that. And I was curious; it got me thinking. Aside from becoming really close to Leon, what are some advice you might give to folks who are maybe getting out of the military soon and who might want to try to approach a career in consulting or working on a show?
Well, I not too long ago had a workshop about that. VME, Veterans in Media and Entertainment. They're like 12,000 strong. I didn't know they existed until I got here in Los Angeles, California. So I've liaised with them. I've done workshops about being an advisor. But for me, to be honest with you, Belisarius started this. He was a Marine Corps veteran. Michael Zimberg was his close friend and partner. He was an Army enlisted veteran. And Charles Johnson. And he was he worked with the Army JAG Corps. And that's how they was able to do JAG. But right now, at that leadership level, all these seasoned veterans are now kind of going away. And so my thought is it's going to take veterans to create those new stories going forward. So when I'm talking to them, the first thing I recommend is write a book, write your story, because most of these stories come out of somebody's book. You have these professional writers that are reading and then they're adapting these to shows or getting ideas or adapting them to movies. And when they do that, they have to grab that veteran and say, look, come with me, either as an advisor or producer or something. And that's the way to get in now, especially with production being 40, 60% down. I think in 3 episodes so far, there was a bunch of veteran background characters, and I was able to get about 12 to 14 BMEs in here, and they told me they're not working. So to be on the NCI set for 1 day or for 3 days, that just blessed them. And then you get to have all these conversations where everybody's trying to start a production, but all the productions are down. It's down heavy, and you know that better than I do. So my advice, first of all, is get on the lot. Forget trying to be the movie star. I don't care how many acting classes you have. If you don't get on the lot somewhere, be a PA, do something, because that's where people start off at. There are major directors right now that started off as a PA or a hairstylist, and now they're major because they were on the lot and they were able to have conversations with people that was working in the industry. So do background, do whatever you do to get on that lot, and then meet people.
That's excellent advice. And I did background on Leon's show a couple of times, and then a couple other totally unrelated. And I played a lawyer on TV once, but to see it from the perspective of the people you're later going to work with, and if they are veterans, they're that much easier to work with because you have a shared experience. And there were many times we had SIGLOC guys would come in, and Leon knows, and you guys know them very, very well. If they come in, I would say, "Yeah, clear that room. I'm going to have some coffee," because they were a team, they were veterans, they could do it. We knew each other. But then we had a bigger group. I would work with the second ADs to go, "Can I please address all the various backgrounds you have today? Who out here is a veteran? have a little fun, like, oh, Air Force, that's not real. But, we'd have fun at it, rope them in, and then say, can I have these people work with, let's say, SIGLOC guys, put them in the stack, and hey, if this guy goes left, you go right, and mirror him. And they became force multipliers. And having a veteran, because of work ethic, just like Mike is saying, they want to do it, they want the work, they want their name known. And we had several that came back multiple times in episodes because the second AD would ask them by name. And my day got a lot easier when these folks were there. Sydney, I can't be there to influence it, but the Royal Australian Armed Forces are playing a lot of those roles, both boots on the ground, aircraft, and vessels. And that's
Wow.
that's the same experience that I know Leon's had with having the agreement with the Navy and public affairs and so forth. The Aussies have taken that to heart, and you can tell the difference.
Mm.
So yeah, I would love working with veterans, even in non-veteran roles, because they take instruction well, and they don't mind working weird hours.
Yeah, just to jump on the tails there too, like was already been alluded, I didn't know what went on here till I got here. I didn't know that half of the jobs that are here or the opportunities existed. And since then, everybody that I've talked to, and I get it out to them, but it's in the military, regardless of the branch, and in the law enforcement community, there's a stigma, there's a culture. You kind of stay with your own, you function with your own, you're looking for that camaraderie. And unbeknownst to me, I never would have thought that that existed here, but it does, very large. And some of these people were never in the military, but the way that the industry function, i.e., production company, they function like a military company, a military regiment. They move, everybody knows their job, everybody comes together. We can have a city one day and tear it down and rebuild it the next. And that's how the military and law enforcement function like that. Everybody knows their key jobs. And you come here and you start off as an apprentice or what have you, and people take you under your wing and they explain to you how to do your job and they set you up for success. So it's a win-win for any military that are looking, or veteran or law enforcement veteran that are looking to get into this industry, I feel, having been here now.
Great. So I want to be respectful of your all's time, but before I let you all go, I was hoping we could end this the same way we started it, with a round robin. And I was just curious, do you have like a on-set save that is like your proudest moment, or is just funny, or just something you want to share before we go? And anyone can start.
I've got one that was very, very touching episode. It was where everyone knows your name, and it dealt with a veteran who came across a crime, uh, lived in a storage locker to develop the information, et cetera, et cetera. He ended up getting killed, we know nothing. So the storyline was Hetty in the office was going to be at the funeral, and they wanted to have it honor this veteran, no family. And although NCIS Los Angeles did not have an agreement with the Department of Defense, I had some friends. We brought in a warrant officer to be in charge of an honor detail, and we brought in some active duty Marines, and they didn't have to practice. One and done, burial detail, firing salute and so forth. Slow, and all these guys know that, the very slow symbolic salute. And Eric Christian Olsen, aka Deeks, funny guy in life and in character. He came up to me. I'd never seen him that serious before. He said, "Whatever you need, today is your day. There's gonna be no goofing around, no nothing," because they realized how symbolic that was. I stood under a camera which was hoisted in the air, and I did for them to mirror and back down again. And we then did the missing man at a bar to set up correctly. And these were some unspoken things, but like these guys here being veterans, they would know. And just sometimes saying less is saying more. But there was such a powerful episode that to this day, I see that warrant officer once a year when I go on the firing range, and he reminds me of what it meant to him to be in that episode.
Mike, you gotta.
Yeah, I have one. So have a couple, but one that stands out is our first episode in Hawaii. There's a team in Hawaii that No Man Left Behind that is dedicated to getting all the POWs back home, whether it's their remains or not. And they fly around the world, to Vietnam and different locations where there were wars, and they bring the remains back. So we were doing one of those things where a C-17 was landing, and there was going to be a casket carry, full honor guard. So I had got the real Navy honor guard and the DPMAA honor guard, which is the carry by 8 versus 6. And they left me in charge of practice on all this because everybody was real military. So, like Al said, they knew what they were doing. Just do what you all do. So one guy, a second class petty officer, active duty, that was in charge of the honor guard, of course, he had to give commands, attention, whatever, right face, interface, get the casket in the limousine. So the director, Larry Tang, came to me and says, Mike, does he have to say that? Because remember, he's not an actor. So they want him to mime it. I said, he can mime it, but it's going to be wrong every time. This is not the Marine Corps silent drill team. So the director went to the production company and says, hey, bring a contract out here because I want to hear that guy say those things on the screen. Now, this second class petty officer had been cocky all day. I mean, he was rough and tough, had his detail down pat. When he signed that contract, he was good. But when they mic'd him up and got hair and makeup and stuck that camera in front of his face, he started to turn red and choke. so, so he was tough and rough all day, but that camera did something. Somebody to pull him to the side and said, man, just be yourself. He says, Mike, that camera's in my face. I said, it's not there. Don't worry about it. And I promise you, they'll give you a couple to get into it. But that was one of those cases where an active duty member, we wanted to do the funeral detail right. We wanted to do the casket carry right. And they allowed those commands, and it was awesome.
Amazing.
RJ?
Well, I don't have a particular episode because, like, again, I'm the new guy here, but as a culmination of the episodes with our show, fortunately for me, this is the first time you're seeing us go home with the actors and their personal lives and the characters, and you're seeing some of the trauma that they have to deal with to just do the job. And for instance, Wheeler's family, the dynamics that are there. We've all that have been in the military and law enforcement lived those things. And a lot of people never see that side of it and never hear about it. So for me, that's the personal side. And to be able to be part of that here and to get that out and to show some of that, that's been really rewarding for me for both of these seasons so far.
That's great.
Well, I guess I'll get to end this up. I think the key thing that I want to leave the audience with is the fact that all of these shows, the whole franchise is veteran friendly. I think every show, I know we did on the original Mothership, we used active duty military. For burial details, we used Marine Corps reservists. We've always had that type of relationship in looking at veterans. And I'll tell you, this is kind of a sad story in a way, but second episode, we did an episode based on a real story that happened out of Camp Lejeune where a parachutist chute didn't open. And in the real story, the Marine didn't die, but in our story, the Marine died. We actually used a guy who had just been out of either Iraq or Afghanistan. Afghanistan, it would have been. And he had to be in a harness, 100-degree weather out in the middle of nowhere up near Magic Mountain, in a hole in his SUV, strapped in for hours. And the guy would say, they would ask him, do you need water? You need anything? Oh, no, I don't need a thing. I just came back from Afghanistan. I'm good. And so he did, and this was one of those where we call them fraternities, starts on Friday, goes into Saturday.
Mhm.
Well, this was a day that we actually saw the sunrise on a Saturday. And believe it or not, Rick Wormack was out there the whole night with us. I was surprised about that. But anyway, so finally they take him out and he's all good after being in there for at least 8 or 9 hours. And turned out 2 weeks later, out in town and gets killed in a robbery.
Mm.
Not he was a victim, not a robber. And he had been a Marine. That was a sad story, but I hate to end on sad stories. Here's a funny one. Same season, season one, and we're doing a show where these two kids are joining the Marine Corps, and they're in the Marine Corps recruiting office, which was downtown LA, and and the recruiter gets shot in the head, right? And during that episode, I had told Mark, about holding his credentials. first take, he had him upside down. And the guy who was in charge of the recruiting district came up. He's a major, a lieutenant colonel in uniform. And Gibbs is doing his thing. Now, Gibbs shows him the credentials, and I see it. Normally, we don't do the tight shots on credentials, but this time they did. So I told the script supervisor, I says, hey, he's holding his credentials upside down, and you could actually read them. And so we go and we tell him that, and for another 13 takes, they do it right. We're sitting at the screening for that episode, and guess which one they picked? The one of him showing the credentials upside down.
Of
And
course.
and the F-bomb came out of my mouth right away. And Mark turned to me, he says, Leon, if that's the only thing we have to worry about, I think we're good. The audience probably won't even notice that. And I said, you can see United States of America is vividly upside down, right? So those are the kinds of things that you kind of remember, and that's just a small thing that happened. But those are the things that tech advisors are there to at least bring to the attention of the people that are producing the show.
Wow.
I have one thing. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Leon. Something I should have said in the beginning, and I apologize for doing it at the end. I just want to thank God, and I feel blessed for being here. And I say that because of the saying, all gave some, but some gave all. There's not a veteran that I haven't talked to in this film industry and among us right here that hasn't been in a situation when they were in the military, deployed or what or not, where they thought they were going to lose their life. And that has happened to me at least on 2 occasions where I didn't think I was going to make it back home. So it is a extreme blessing to me. I thank God for keeping me around to be able to be here and do this and share. But thank you all for that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you all. This has been amazing and a real honor for me to get to talk to you all. So I just want to thank you again for everything you do and thank you for your service again. And thank you so much for just all the great knowledge you've passed on to my readers and viewers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks
for the
for doing
opportunity.
this. This is
Yeah.
probably a first. It's been a long time since I've been interviewed for a military journal, so that's great.
Yeah,
Quit
well,
playing
thank you
that,
for doing
Leon.
it.
Ryan, don't
Pardon?
make it a last. This is a first, but don't make it a last.
I'm going to do my
Hey,
best. I'm going to do my best to
I'm
keep it
three
going.
quarters of a century old. I'm kind
There's no
of
reason you can't make 2 more quarters. You got 2 more in you.
I don't know. I
He's
hope so.
he's still out
I,
working.
Well,
I hope.
thank you all
Thanks,
again.
man.